In this series of video lessons, we're going to be looking at public speaking, why it's necessary, and what one needs to consider in order to speak confidently and well in public. The first thing that we're going to be looking at today is purpose, why one makes a speech in the first place. Harvey Diamond, the author, spoke about the importance of knowing what you want to say, because if you don't, your audience never will. So we have to have two considerations before we start writing the speech. First of all, what is it that we want to say? And second of all, what is our overriding purpose? For example, if somebody who was paying tribute to a person at a funeral would be wanting to make everybody there remember what a fantastic person they had been. So the two issues we need to look at is what is your intention: to entertain, to educate, to inform, to amuse, and second of all, to look at the message that you want to convey. Once you're ready with those 2 points, you're ready to start writing your speech. There are many reasons to say the things that we do, but probably the best reason is because we actually have something to say. Today we're going to be looking at the message that we deliver in our speech. And I believe that there are two important components to a message. First of all, personal experience. It's really important for the audience to get a sense that you are an expert in your field, that you're passionate about what you're talking about. And obviously, if you've experienced something or know something firsthand, you will speak convincingly as an authority on it. The second issue to create a balance in your speech is to have some research. When I say research, I'm not talking about reams of facts that are rattled off to the audience, but a balance in terms of some information, some substance, possibly quotations, references to literature, and of course, references to what's going on in society in your own country and in the world. Quotations are often used in speeches, and I'm sure you've all heard examples of when they've been used really well and other times when they've been completely unnecessary. Quotations can give us vital information, they can add variety to a speech, and sometimes they can just be humorous and fun. However, there are a few traps that we need to avoid when using quotations. First of all, the temptation to add a quotation simply because one likes it. It really has to link to the speech and be relevant. The second trap one can fall into with the use of quotations is how one introduces the quotation. It's very clumsy, for example, to say, "and I quote," and then to quote. One would rather try and find a more fluent, sophisticated, smooth way of introducing the quote. For example, when Martin Luther King said, "I have a dream," you naturally introduce the speech. It's also unnecessary and quite irritating to use the quotation marks like this. Much better to link the quotation to the rest of the sentence. So when you're using quotations, consider carefully, first of all, which quotations you're going to use, and second of all, how you're going to link them to the rest of the paragraph. In this section, we're going to be looking at the structure of a speech, how you actually put the speech together in a logical and impressive way. Obviously, the first impression that one gets is via the introduction. The introduction needs to be catchy, entertaining, provocative. You could use a quotation or you could ask a question, but something that draws the audience in and gets their attention. The body of the speech ideally should consist of no more than 3 or 4 main points. In that way, you are able to delve deeply into each of the issues so that your speech really has substance and not overwhelm the listener or give them too much information or too many list-like bits of information. So 3 or 4 main points that are dealt with adequately is ideal. The next consideration is how one links the various components of one's speech. One obviously requires smooth transitions. One doesn't want an abrupt ending of one subject and then moving on without any linking words. So examples of words would be similarly, by contrast, another example to create that fluent overall effect in the speech. And finally then the conclusion. Similar points to those that I've mentioned with regard to the introduction apply. The conclusion is the final impression people have of you, so it needs to have impact. You could ask a question, you could use a quotation, or you could once again use a very provocative statement. But the most important thing is to end with impact. In this section, I'm going to be looking at the presentation, the delivery of one's speech. It's vitally important that having written a really good speech, you don't let yourself down in the way in which you deliver that message. In this section, there are many factors to consider. The first is how one approaches the podium or the place from which one is going to speak initially. It's vitally important that one's posture is correct, not too formal, stand up straight, don't slouch. Gestures are vital in a speech. First of all, they indicate a naturalness about your delivery, and second of all, they allow us to convey emphasis. So it's vitally important that you do consider, however planned the speech is, which gestures you're going to use, and that you ensure that they do come across in a very natural but effective way. The next issue to consider is one's vocal variety. It becomes very monotonous if one speaks in one particular tone or uses one particular pitch. So do consider the vocal variety that you use. Emphasis is vital. Choose key words in each sentence, certainly in each paragraph that you wish to emphasize, so the audience realizes what the main points of your speech actually are. And obviously, one needs to articulate clearly, not excessively so and formally so, but articulate clearly and speak at a pace at which the audience can cope and keep up with what you are saying. In this section, we're going to be looking at the use of cue cards or notes when one is delivering a speech. First of all, what one needs to consider with regards to the actual appearance of a cue card. One doesn't want distracting, enormous cue cards in peculiar shapes or bright colors. A small white card note will do. One also doesn't want A4 sheets. It's very distracting and creates a barrier between the speaker and the audience. One definitely doesn't staple one's cue cards and then flap them over as one goes through, so one just gently moves one card behind the other. It's a good idea to number cue cards. In case the cue cards are dropped, you can just retrieve them and quickly put them back into the order that they should be in. So those are the factors one needs to consider with regard to the type of cue cards that are used.
54 years ago to the day, a young Jewish boy from a small town in the Carpathian Mountains woke up in Buchenwald.
The second issue is how one holds cue cards and how one actually uses cue cards. Obviously, they're meant to be used as a cue, as an aid, and not to be read from throughout the entirety of the speech.
54 years ago to the day, a young Jewish boy from a small town in the Carpathian Mountains woke up in Buchenwald. He was finally free, but there was no joy in his heart.
In order to glance down effectively and still maintain that sustained eye contact with the audience, it's vital that the cue cards are held fairly high up. One doesn't want to hold them too close to the face, and certainly if they're too low down, it's going to be very awkward when one needs to consult the cards. So somewhere sort of mid-body, one would need to hold the cue cards. One also needs to avoid being too formal or stiff and clutching both cards. Release a card whenever you need to gesture, and in that way you'll be able to see what you want to read on your cue cards and to be very natural in the way in which you use them during a delivery. There are many occasions when one speaks where one will speak naturally without a microphone, and other occasions one will be required to use a microphone. There are a few small tips which can have disastrous consequences if one doesn't actually adhere to them. The first is obviously the distance from the microphone. If one gets too close to the microphone, you're going to have distortion. It also masks part of your face, so be careful that you keep the microphone a reasonable distance from your face, and it's probably in line with your chin or lower than your chin. The second important thing to realize is that the microphone is actually doing the job of projecting your voice, and so you would speak in the normal voice that you would use when you were addressing friends or people close by, and not actually shout into the microphone.